Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Today, I have two guests, Elizabeth and Amy, who together create the Doula Duo. Elizabeth is a prior educational assistant, current birth doula and postpartum doula, certified sleep consultant, as well as a nanny. With her offerings alongside Amy's postpartum doula support that she offers, they have come together to create an amazing program called Beyond the Bump, which is currently being hosted in person in Barrie, Ontario, Canada, and eventually will be brought to you virtually, so stay tuned. But the program is an amazing 2-hour class that they prepare families for the 4th trimester. Together, they are sharing their goal of offering families education and support through their classes and one-on-one services. I am so excited that I get to have two guests today, so thank you guys for joining me. And we were just talking about how maybe the podcast will make it up north now too, which is kind of cool.
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
we're going to make sure that you get heard up here, because your podcast is amazing. You bring lots of valuable information, so we'll be sharing it for sure.
Well,
so if you're listening, anybody in Canada, spread the word.
Yes, for sure. I appreciate it. I'm excited because when you reached out and you guys were like, we should come on, and like trying to figure out what topic to pick, it was so many options, I feel like, between all of the different services you guys provide and the different things that we could have picked out of that. But I know we kind of decided to settle with boundaries and communication, which I think is probably like such a hot topic for just about everybody. And it sounded like that's a topic that you guys do a lot of during your class too. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a big part of the postpartum preparation, because really setting the boundaries for what's going to happen when the baby comes should happen before the baby comes, so that people know, they just assume they're going to be able to come over and visit, or they assume that certain things, and you might not have the same ideas between you and your partner. So having a good talk with your partner, first of all, that you're on the same page as far as what's going to happen when this new baby comes, but then communicating those to other people. So that's one example of boundaries you would have to set, is for visitors. And then there's, just like boundaries in general when it comes to once the child is born, setting boundaries with your child as well. So there's so many different aspects of it. But I think if you get comfortable with one, and it just kind of spreads over into really the rest of your life. But in particular, it's hard for new moms. You're overwhelmed with emotions. But I think if you have that conversation beforehand, and people know what to expect, that can make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really so much communication that goes into any type of boundaries and communication. And I mean, communication obviously goes into communication. This is when I told you guys I stumble on my words. We don't edit. We just keep it real.
Yeah, no worries.
But it's true. The communication is so important, and kind of pre-setting those boundaries is huge. I know I created a postpartum plan. You guys have the class that you guys are teaching, and I think we could probably collectively all agree that, having stuff lined up and ahead of time prepared so that you kind of know what to go into it, because it's true, when someone just calls or texts or randomly shows up, you're not going to be like, bye, and turn them away because you don't want to make waves. So kind of having those lined up already is so, so important and so huge.
And I think as postpartum doulas, there's I think kind of all postpartum doulas, have kind of the same vision, is that you're wanting to communicate that to your clients and just to anybody and talk to spread the word that it's okay to set boundaries, and it's actually important, and it should be done before the baby's here, because once the baby's here, it's so overwhelming already, right? That it's really important to set those goals ahead of time.
Yeah, I think it's the boundaries of when people are coming, but it's also boundaries so that you can assure that you're getting the support you need, right? Like I always joke to my families that, having the aunt or the mother-in-law come over and just hold the baby while the baby sleeps is not helpful to anyone. Although they may love sitting and snuggling a newborn, like don't get me wrong, I love it too, but that's not the most beneficial thing for really anybody. So having stuff laid out so that they can help in a proper and helpful manner is so important and a huge boundary that you could set for sure. Now,
yeah, and
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I'm sure in our class, and I'm sure in your workbook, you have all those things kind of laid out for people to plan ahead for, right? Like meal prepping, chores that need to be done around the house, so that when people come over and actually want to help and say, what can I help you with? You can say, oh, well, look, there's a list right there. Go ahead and pick something. Right.
Yes,
I'm sure you
exactly.
have that in your work.
That's exactly it. And that's huge. And sometimes you don't know where to start, which is why it is nice to have a class or a workbook or something to kind of guide you in the conversation and the setting up of this whole new future of your life. Because as I often hear new parents saying, like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to need for support, or like, I don't really know what it's going to be like, so I don't want to prepare. And that's understandable, but at the same time, you almost want to over prepare and then say, okay, now I don't need this or I don't need that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. We like to, like you said, get people ready with like lists. Some people have a hard time sharing their feelings verbally, or they feel like they're confronted on the spot, and you have a hard time getting your words out, and you're just like, okay, fine, like, okay, I don't want to rock the boat, so just hold the baby. Whereas if you prepare people ahead of time, we encourage people to even just send out an email to the whole family and friends and be like, okay, baby's coming soon, this is what we expect, and if you're not on board with that, well,
don't come over.
Right. And it can be hard to make those waves, but like if you're sending out a group email too, like people don't need to know who's getting sent to. I mean, you can CC everybody, but even if you do like the BCC, it says like undisclosed recipients or whatever it says. So people know that they're not the only one getting it. Granted, like your grandmother's grandmother might not know, but you can look at that and say, okay, everyone else is getting this. They're not just like targeting me or whatever. I think that a lot of those kind of feelings happen a lot with like in-laws and parents and soon to be grandparents conversations too.
Yeah, they feel like they have a right the baby, right? Or, oh, but this is my first grandchild, I have to. Well, no, you don't have to. So, you have to be strong. You have to protect your relationship with your partner, because it can cause a lot of friction and that's the communication piece again. If you haven't decided with your partner what your expectations are, that's not gonna be good for the two of you either. So you have to be on the same page and just stick to it, right? And it gets easier the more you say no, or not now, or maybe another time. It gets easier, and then it just trickles down into everything else too. So
I like the idea of your workbook too, because I feel like for some people it can be very difficult in the moment to set those boundaries when they're worried about hurting somebody's feelings and that kind of thing. But I feel like actually writing that down beforehand and being very clear about what your feelings are about it and what your expectations are can make it then easier for your voice to be able to come out and say, no, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I need. Whereas if you're just doing it in the moment and you're already tired and overwhelmed and everything else, I think it's harder. And then you're worried more about, oh, but I don't, like you said, grandparents, I don't want to upset my mom because she's the grandma. And but yeah, I think writing it is really beneficial.
I think it's also a good thing to think about that you're setting yourself up for the future too, right? Like, yes, we're talking about the postpartum period, and we're talking about, someone taking your baby and not giving them back to feed, or when they're fussy, or whatever your boundary that you've set. But we're also talking about like that goes beyond that. Like now you're a parent. Yeah. Now you have to set yourself up for like what's happening when my toddler has a fit. Like, is another grandparent going to step in and handle that? Or how are we disciplining, or how are we parenting and navigating all of that? Because the episode that will go live before this that I just recorded, we were talking about how parenting styles are so different and how things every generation changes so much. And right now there's like a big spike in the gentle parenting type of parenting style, which is, I wasn't saying, I was like, I don't know if it should be called like a fad or like a trend, because it's not, but there's definitely an influx of people utilizing that parenting style. And so a lot of grandparents don't understand that, right? So if that's something that's a boundary for you down the line, you're practicing those skills now. And I think that there's something to be said about that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that all ties in with the communication piece too, because not only are you communicating, to the people around you, but it's really, really important to have these conversations before the birth with your partner, not just about your relationship, but all the other relationships that are in your life. When his mom or your partner's mom is coming over, what does that look like? And how is your partner feeling about your in-laws and friends and that? Like, it's a really good topic to have even with each other. If you're not having it with other people, with your partner, it's very important to have that conversation beforehand about parenting style, about the influx of people. Anything. Anything. Yeah.
I think it really starts with partners.
Yes, absolutely.
It really does. And I think I hear and I see a lot in like Facebook groups or like, the crazy, silly reels that you see on Instagram or whatever, but a lot about, my mother-in-law thought that my mother-in-law tried to be in the room when I was giving birth, and that's different than having my mom in the room. And like, that's another boundary. And like, when it comes to an individual and their partner too, it can be like a blurry line sometimes for different groups and different sides of the family. And yeah, totally starts with your partner, and you have to find what works best. Like, is your partner going to be in charge of communicating with their family and you're in charge of yours? Or do you feel more comfortable talking to your in-laws and vice versa? I think that's so important for sure. And now,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what? I'm going to let you go.
There's so much communication that needs to happen with your partner about everything with a newborn coming home, right? So good time to start practicing it before that happens.
Yes.
They may not know what's important to you, right? Like, if it's really going to drive you crazy that the dishes are not done, then you kind of want to set your priorities as far as, okay, what would your top 3 things be that you want me to do, or what's really going to drive you crazy if it's not done, because partners are not mind readers either. So if you haven't communicated to them like, I really, when you get home from work, if the partner's working, you're home all day with the baby, they don't know what to expect if you haven't asked for it. So they come home from a day of work and you're really just wanting to like pass the baby off and maybe go take a shower. But if you don't have a conversation about that, how are they supposed to know, right? And then it ends up being one of those a conflict or a blame game of, but partners are not mind readers, and it goes both ways, right?
Right. I think the healthiest of relationships still has a bit of a struggle when you add a child to the mix, especially the first, right? I mean, it's a huge new life that you're creating. Like, everyone knows, we're starting a family, right? But like, you're legitimately changing who you are. Your priority isn't just you and your partner now. Like, your first priority is likely your child, and I guess it debatably should be your child, right? So you should be able to, and you need to be able to communicate those types of things. Otherwise, you're right, there's underlying, hatred or upset feelings, and nobody knows about it if you don't say anything. But the sleep deprivation kicks in, and the stress of in-laws and family kicks in, and social media, and it makes people so worried to, I think, cause conflict or bring things up, because nobody wants to seem like the bad guy. But if you don't, nothing changes.
It's just all going to build up, and then it'll be something silly that causes like a big blow up, right? And then you're going to be going back 6 months and being like, well, 6 months ago you didn't take the garbage out when you came home from work, and you knew that was a priority for me. And it's really like, it doesn't even matter at that time anymore. But if you haven't addressed things as they go, then it's gonna build up, especially because postpartum, you're so, emotionally raw and tired, and all of those things come into play. And it makes it harder to communicate. So we try to tell people to like pick a time, and just maybe set a date for it. Even be like, there's been a couple of things on my mind, but the time you get home from work till the baby goes to bed, like that's not a good time to talk. So maybe at like 8 o'clock at night, let's meet on the couch and talk about some things. And if you preface it and you say, I need to talk to you about some things, then you can't backtrack and be like, oh, never mind. Or, you've already kind of opened the door a crack to say, like, I want to talk about some things. And making sure it's a time when you're going to be open to being able to have positive communication, that it doesn't turn into a blame game. You're careful of your tone of voice, and you're not always phrasing things like, well, you do this or you do that, or I always have to blah blah blah, that you're using more feelings words and things like that, just so it's open communication and positive communication, and it doesn't lead to people going blame game, or people going to bed mad. So if there's a few techniques for helping with that as well.
Yeah, I think that like conflict is something that nobody really wants to deal with. I don't think anybody goes, yeah, let's go have a fight today. Like no one wants to do that, especially when you like love the other individual, right? I think that I love the idea of, sitting down and finding a time to talk through something. And you're right. If you say, hey, I want to talk about something, not only can you now not back out, but the other person is now probably slightly on edge trying to wonder what you want to talk about, right? So you really can't get out of it.
Yeah, but and if you don't look at it in terms of like, oh, we're gonna have a fight tonight, more as let's sit down and let's learn something, let's problem solve together. Like look at it from a positive. It's just like any type of setback or any type of, you could say, failure. It's a learning opportunity, right? So if you don't communicate it, nobody can learn from it.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's so cool too. Like you said, you trying to use specific like tone of voice and like specific wording. I think that it's also, if you know that your partner is very much like a physical touch love language person, maybe you're like sitting on the couch together, or you're holding hands, or, we're postpartum. We're not expecting anything crazy to be happening, but like you can still have special moments during that.
Shut off the TV, look at each other. Maybe even start with not what the problem is, but like, okay, how are you feeling? How was your day? Tell me something good about today. And kind of lead into it a little bit, not just like go right at it, but
right. And I think it goes for both partners though, too, right? Like it's not just the birthing partner. I think they're both new parents, so they need to both communicate their needs.
Yeah. Like, the man might be like, you know what, when I come home from work, I would like my 15 minutes. If it was my husband, it would be on the toilet watching real
every social media dad.
Don't just like shove the baby at me when I step in the door. So figuring out between the two of you, like she wants to be like, oh, here you go, and he wants a little time, so maybe you meet in the middle, right? And set it up so that you both get what you want, right? And it's not a battle of a winner or a loser or anything like that. It's just compromising, but you have to communicate it and compromise and work it out so that everybody's happy.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said about just like partnership boundaries and parenting boundaries. And we so often, and I think society sees it just so quickly as once you have a baby, like everything's about the baby, but you have to also remember that you're still a relationship and you're also still individuals, right? So finding the self-care and the boundaries that you have for that, but then also like the ones we're talking about, you're finding boundaries for your relationship. I had a client who, whenever her husband came home, they would go for a walk because like he got to decompress, talk about the day, they were out of the house, like, and it was something that you got to kind of look forward to, right? Because I find that new parenthood and just having a newborn in general is just a constant loop of the same 4 things over and over and over. So looking forward to something like going for a walk at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock can be really like helpful, mentally, physically, all the things, right? I say the same thing about bedtime routines with clients all the time. Like, no, your child's not really going to realize they're having a bedtime routine at 2 or 3 weeks old, but you will, and it'll help you to kind of like wind down and something to look forward to, right? So I think there's so much to be said about that too, and just like the partnership boundaries of what people need and what works. Just like you said, you know, hand the baby off or give them 15 minutes. Finding somewhere that works in between is huge.
Yeah. And you know, defining your roles as far as, you know, who's going to do what. And, you know, maybe you might be in charge of cooking, but you know what, you've had a bad day that day. So you know, being on the same page about what the expectations are, and you know, that communication, like, oh, I had a bad day, I didn't make dinner, letting the person know so that they can be like, okay, would you like me to pick something up, or should we order something, or hey, maybe we'll just have cereal tonight. But then they're not walking in the door expecting dinner,
right.
And there's no dinner, right? And nobody said anything about it. So then it's like, well, I'm hungry and there's no, you know. So if you just little things, like just be thoughtful, kind of think ahead, like, okay, if this isn't happening or is happening, how would the other person feel if I don't communicate that? You know, because you just take the guesswork out.
Yeah. I feel like it creates almost like kind of connects us to like your own and like personal boundaries too, right? Like if you typically make dinner and you didn't have the energy because, or the time because baby's being super fussy and wants to be held, whereas you normally cook during their nap, right? Sending your partner a message and saying those types of things, but then not feeling completely guilt tripped over it, right? Like you have to remember that, like, yes, your relationship, but also you're a person, right? So just because you weren't able to get dinner done today, or even if it was for a whole week because you had a crabby baby, you know, that doesn't mean that you're any less of a partner because the other partner's putting in more, or that doesn't mean that you're any less of a parent because you had to hold your baby longer, or, you know, whatever you're feeling. Obviously you can feel both. And like, that's something I'm huge and I feel super passionate about. Like you can feel two opposite feelings at the same time and they're both valid, right?
Yes,
but it's okay to like feel that way, and to set your own boundaries. I think that I'm sure I should say that in part of your program, when you talk about boundaries, we also talk about self-care. They go hand in hand, right? Do you guys have like self-care suggestions or practices that you typically suggest during like your class or with your postpartum clients or anything like that?
For me, it really ties into like, what do you like to do? What makes you feel good? And it's different for everybody. So if sitting in the sun for 5 minutes is what you want to do to self-care, great. And if you're a bath person, have a bath, but what works for me might not work for the next person. So kind of figuring out, like, if there's something that you really know that you like to do or helps you feel good even before you have this baby, then keep prioritizing that. And maybe it's, you know, breaking things down into chunks that, you know, you used to like to get, you know, a 30-minute walk in a day. Well, maybe 30 minutes isn't manageable, but maybe you do 10 minutes 3 times, or maybe you start with 10 minutes. If there's certain foods that you feel like really nourish your soul, if it's certain podcasts, meditations, books, you know, just the basics, feeding your soul, feeding your spirit, basically whatever you like to do, you know. If it's sleep is a big one, you know, but prioritizing those things, that you are still a person. And yeah, whatever
and I think
makes
that's
you
the
feel
message
good.
we really need to send to parents is
Yeah.
You still are a person. You're a new parent, but you still are an individual, and you still need to be a good parent. You have to prioritize yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. You're going to be a better parent if you're feeling better.
Right. Just because you're now a parent doesn't mean that's your only title, right? I mean,
Yes.
you're still whatever your name is. You're still a partner, a wife, or whatever you are. And now you're also a mother, right? It's like another thing added to the resume. It's not like it's the only thing that's on there. And I think it's so hard to remember that, because I mean, I feel like I've said this a million times on the podcast now, but like I always say that when you have a newborn, it very much feels like an unhealthy relationship because you're constantly
your toxic relationship. I love that term.
And I say it all the time. Like, I think I literally just said on the episode before this too, but like, it is because this baby is taking everything out of you, literally sucking the life out of you, right? And you're not getting anything back for the longest time. And so it can so easily turn into this black hole of like, they're all I am, right? Because you're all they are. So it's so all encompassing. And I think it's so important to remember that. I think my heart goes out to all of the people that are parenting alone, because that's a totally different, topic that I feel like I need to do a whole episode on. But I think that
you should actually. That would be
great. I gotta find someone. If anyone out there is a single parent, come on.
Yes.
But it is. I mean, I think that it really is important to kind of like find your village. Like, I know that we're 3 doulas sitting here talking about how you should hire a doula probably, but you should hire a doula. You know, and just having support, because I don't think that you can be able to prioritize yourself as much as you should be if you're the only person there and you're the only person caring for your child at all times, you know?
Yeah. We actually talked about that in our group today, and I was saying to them that, and I mean, most of them I think are in partnerships, but regardless whether you are or you aren't, that yes, like setting those boundaries and telling people what you need is all part of self-care as well, right? Like
protecting yourself, really. You know,
like having when people are coming over to visit, and if you don't want them or you want them to help you do some other things than just hold the baby, that's prioritizing yourself and your needs as well.
Right. Even if you're not doing that in that moment of like, please don't hold the baby, do this, I'm going to go take a nap. They're doing that right now so that you don't have to do it later, right? Like, to them in the moment, it might not look like a self-care moment, but like, that's saving you 15 minutes from doing the dishes later when you're completely exhausted or whatever it might be.
People then they want to hold the baby too, but I think they also think that they're giving you a break, which, you know, maybe in one sense they are, but at the same time, a new mother parent, I should say, they want to hold their baby. Like, they get overwhelmed at times and might need a break, but when they put that baby down or they give it to someone else, they miss the baby. They want to be bonding with that baby, not doing dishes.
It causes more anxiety. It causes you more anxiety that somebody else is holding your baby. That's not a good thing for you.
Especially if it's somebody that you don't trust as much. I've had clients that say, you know, my sister has 3 kids and so she can come and hold the baby, and like, I'm typically okay with that. But, you know, when my best friend comes, hasn't had kids yet and she's like awkward and uncomfortable holding the baby. So like, she's like, oh, go take a shower. Well, I can't go take a shower because you're holding her weirdly. And what if she starts crying? You won't know how to deal with the baby and all of those things. You know, you find the people that work for things, and that's something else to even think about, right? You might have a long list of supportive tasks that people could do, but somebody might be really great at cooking you dinner because they know what you like or your allergies or something. And somebody else might be really great at keeping your baby happy and soothed so that you can take a shower and take a nap. And it's okay that people are good at different tasks and that you're only comfortable with XYZ people doing a specific task. I think that's super huge too.
One of our guest speakers that we have at our 4th trimester group is a perinatal mood disorders coordinator for a local hospital, but like our whole region. So she comes and talks about mental health. But in her little package that she gives, there's a page with a list that says, who can I call when I just want to bitch? Who can I call when I need a ride somewhere? Who can I call to bring me a coffee? Because you have different friends or different relatives or people who are better at certain things than others. Like, don't ask me to come cook because I hate cooking, but I would gladly do something else, right? Or you know, oh crap, it's garbage day and I didn't get the garbage out, but my next door neighbor said, you know, anytime I need the garbage done, just give them a shout. Or if it's, I mean, we get a lot of snow where we live, so, you know, I need so-and-so to shovel the driveway or whatever. Like, have those people already ahead of time, have a conversation ahead of time so that they're not like surprised either, but, you know, letting them know, hey, Amy, like, when I'm having a bad day and I just really want to complain and I don't want solutions to problems,
you just need to
I just want somebody to say, yeah, that sucks, I'm calling you, you know. And people will also feel good knowing they have a role, right? it kind of takes, because I'm sure coming in, you know, they might feel also like they have an idea of what they want to do in their head, but they also might be like, oh, like even us, sometimes you get hired and you go to a new family's home, and sometimes you don't really know what to expect. Sometimes they don't know what they want. So helping them figure that out is part of our job. But you know, and I've had clients too who say, like, I'm not very good about asking for what I want, but if I left you a list, would that be okay? And I'm like, totally, you know, I'll do anything you want, right? So yeah, having that list of people, like the go-to people, like you have your emergency list for other things like fire, ambulance, blah blah blah. Well, have your, you know,
emergency coffee delivery.
It's so true.
You know, I won't be offended, like, could you please just bring me a coffee, but you can't come in, right? Those kind of people who, you know, like, yeah, just bring me a meal, but just leave it on the porch, because you know, and
I think
it's like, you know what, maybe this relationship right now is not a priority, and let's just, you know, your relationships are going to change. The people who you're friends with, your work relationships, your personal relationships, if you're the only one in your friend group who has kids, those other friends are not really going to get it. So then you need to find a new, like a postpartum support group like we do, where these moms have never met before, but the connections that they make with other people who are going through the same thing, the amount of support that they give each other and the tips and stuff like that, it's really cool. So you find other people, right? Make a pitch if you don't already have one.
I think there's something to be said too about, like, there's people that want to help, right? And I think that no matter what you're looking for help with, like, or whatever is really like draining you and that you absolutely hate doing, like, somebody else is bound to want to do it for you, right? And I think people are so afraid to like ask for help because everyone wants to look like this person that has it all together, and especially like this social media, like, mom does everything, right? But that's not how it is, and it isn't how it should be. And I think that there really is, like, people are asking you, well, what can I do? Because they want to know. Like, if someone asks you, what can I do? Like, don't say nothing. Say something, right? Like you said, what can I do for you? I'm out. You know, can you get me a coffee, and just drop it off, right? Like, anything, even as little as it may seem, that person's asking to help because they want to help, and they know that down the line you'll do the same for them, right? So
everybody feels good.
I will say too something for the listeners out there. Something that happened the other day is I was hired to go and visit a family for an afternoon, and I don't know if this is something you see in your practice very much, Madison, but a friend hired me to go and work with their friends and their new babies. That was their gift to them, and I think that is a beautiful gift. Like, they don't need more sleepers, they don't need so much baby stuff, right? So people who are listening, that's a great gift to give to somebody who's expecting a baby, is postpartum care.
It really is. And that just brings us to the services, not stuff, that should just be a bumper sticker. I swear one of these days I'm going to make one, because it really is, right? Like, I say, especially if it's not your first baby too, and you already have like baby apparatuses and clothes that are put away, clothes that don't fit your baby for what, like 4 days, I swear, before they go into the next size. They wear it maybe once. I'm sure half your dresser your baby's never worn, but you know, so it's like, you know, the services thing is so huge, especially, like I said, with like not the first children, but the ones that come after. And I've had someone hire or pay for a gift certificate before. When I see people on like my Facebook feed or clients on or Instagram or whatever that are announcing that they're pregnant with another baby, I always message them and I'm like, hey, so you can do this. And so many people don't even think about it. I'm like, whether it's postpartum support, it's a sleep consultant, it's a lactation consultant, it's a birth doula, it's a house cleaner or a dog walker. Really, you can pick anything you want. And it's so funny because I had one client who didn't think of this, but she was like, my best friend got us a subscription to, I don't know if you guys have HelloFresh up north, but like basically like a meal. So like meal delivery service. She's like, I didn't
Right.
even know it existed. They did it for like a
Right.
couple months for us. It came like a couple times a week. She's like, it was so nice too, because then I just kept the subscription up a little bit because it was really helpful for me. Sometimes
Yeah.
you don't know what's helpful because you're not willing to, invest in something like a splurge item, quote unquote, for yourself. Whereas if someone else does it for you, you might realize how much support and how much energy that really makes you feel better.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great idea too, actually. Yeah, the meal kits for sure.
Yeah. And for
so
new mom, having somebody come over, there's so much uncertainty for them. Like, am I doing this right? And having somebody come over who's not emotionally invested in your life, obviously we care, but it comes off better from a professional of how to swaddle, or, oh, have you tried this feeding technique, etc., than it does maybe from your great Aunt Mary, who doesn't have kids, but thinks
it's been
she
like
knows.
20 years. Yeah, right.
Where it's
I think
a long time. Yeah. And things like the evidence changes. And if you look back, on certain things, like even car seats, like when I was a baby, my mom had a car bed for me, and she said that was just so cool. But like, there wasn't even car seats. So when these older generations are trying to tell you, how they did it, I find that's another one where people have to set boundaries and just say, that's great for you, but these days, blah blah blah, or the evidence shows da 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 da. I'm not comfortable doing it that way. Things like
which
that.
can be hard to say. Like,
it can.
there are so much, because you hear I did that to blah 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 and they turned out fine. Well, of course they turned out fine.
Yeah.
But also the death rate was probably much higher back then than it is now. Like, I hear a lot of that with like safe sleep stuff. Oh, well, I gave them a blanket. I'm like, yes, but now we know these things, right? Like, things change, and that's okay. And I think it's hard for people to say oh, well, we're not doing that way. Evidence shows. Sometimes it's hard for them to say those things. So I love being able to work with families who do have really invested, like, parents and family as a whole, because a lot of the time during prenatals, when I'm taking people on and I'm meeting with them, I'll say, if they tell me that they're going to have, in-laws and family super supportive, I'll be like, well, tell them to come, because I can throw people under the bus. Like, you throw me under the bus. Like, be like, oh my, well, I'm
all the time. I'm like, if you, and we try to teach you good communication, and try to boost you up and build your confidence and get you to set boundaries. But sometimes you might just have to use me. I'm like, use me as a cop out. Say, you know what, my doula said da 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 da. Or if you say, my doctor said, people take it, oh, well, they're a professional, so it might help as well to, like, if you can't, there might be certain issues that you can't win that battle with your mom or your mother-in-law. Just say, well, my doula said, my doula said,
and I do
2 weeks.
Yes, and I do a lot of it with sleep too.
Yes. Don't explain yourself. Just, this is my answer. And don't go on about it. Don't explain. Don't be like, well, no, because no, like, no, just no. Right.
Don't give them the opportunity to poke holes in things.
No. You're like, nope, done. Right.
Yep. And I get a lot of it during postpartum, which is why I bring them in. But I also get a lot of it like with sleep consulting clients. So I'll help to sleep train a kiddo. And then the family is like, okay, well, my in-laws are watching them. How do I assure that they do naps the same way? And I'm like, hand them the sleep plan that we wrote, and feel free to add them to the group chat. And I'm happy to answer their questions, right? Or, oh, well, they're really going to be, they don't understand that we can't put the blanket in the crib, or they don't understand that if baby's fussing, I can't leave them in the crib for a few minutes. Okay, well, here's your exact quote. You can tell them, copy, paste my message, and sometimes it's so beneficial to come from somebody else. One, because they believe it more when it is from that professional. And two, because now I can be the wave in your family. You don't need to be causing all the issues.
Yeah. And you're really just giving them a tool that they can use that supports what they really want to do anyways, without offending them. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's all. It's so huge. Okay. So Oh, I guess I get to get two answers to these questions. This is just, it got me so excited. My last question I always ask is, if you had one piece of advice and one product recommendation for like a new parent, what would you tell them and what would you suggest for them? And now I get two of you, so I get four things. This is going to be exciting.
I
So
probably had to try to think of different answers.
I don't think I ever came up with a product. Unfortunately, I
That's
think
all
both
right.
of our products were.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
fair
both
enough.
like, so especially for sleep and just, I mean, you could talk about boundaries and sleep like for days on end. So we'll come back and talk about that another day if you like. But I really like a white noise machine. I think it's a really great tool, whether you have, and I've done on our Instagram, I've done a post about the different types of noise. So there's not just white noise. So whatever noise you choose is up to you. But I like the ones with different options, but definitely noise machine. And then my biggest piece of advice, just put those big girl panties on and be true to yourself. And yeah, you just have to be like, yeah, okay, you do you, I'm going to do me, right? And be okay with that.
Yeah.
And my biggest advice is very similar in that, but I feel very strongly about how you were mentioning about the social media that's out there and being the perfect mom. And we actually talked about this in our group today, that is one of my biggest pet peeves. You're just doing your best, and everything that you're doing is amazing. Like your baby doesn't know anything different,
right? Yeah.
Right. So just you do what you need to do. Don't listen to what other people, don't compare yourself to other people. Do what works for your family and be super proud because you're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's like also
my product is the what noise machine
noise machine too. I know they're good. They're good.
I still sleep with white noise. So.
Yeah.
Oh, same. Oh, same. I think there's also something to be said too about not only being, proud of yourself and doing it all for yourself too, like you were mentioning, but oh, great. And now I lost my total train of thought of what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Oh, I just got too excited about white noise machines.
Yeah.
Oh, about comparing yourself to others. I was gonna say also try not to compare yourself to yourself, because I've seen this thing and I think it's so true. Like, just because you're giving 100% of yourself one day and you only have 80% of yourself in your energy the next day doesn't mean you're not giving 100%, right? So like, as long as you're giving 100% or whatever percent of what you have to give that day, it might not be comparable to the next day. So I think that's so it was such a wise thought. And I was like, it's so true.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're really,
important.
your parts of you are the same person, but you're not the same person. Like you weren't, the day you give birth, you become something else. Like you still have those other pieces of, this is Elizabeth, but now Elizabeth is also a mom, and she wasn't a mom yesterday, or she's now a mom of 2 or 3 or 4, or however many children that you have. So you're really not the same person. So kind of embrace that new person as well. Like, don't lose your old self, but she might be, just maybe buried down a little bit for a little while. But also just embrace this new person and your new body and your new, like, everything is different. So it's really like a new beginning as well. And like, who do I want to be as a mom? And, take those parts of yourself that you really love and carry those forward. But it's a good opportunity to maybe let go of some of the, like, what Elizabeth was, she's very type A and perfectionist, but now she has to let go of some of that as she navigates through motherhood, because you cannot do it all. And if you set your expectations too high, then you're not being realistic, and you'll be too hard on yourself. So yeah.
I love that all. I appreciate you guys coming so much. It's been such a blast to have 2 people too. I feel like so much information, and I'm sure that you guys will be back. I'm going to leave the information for these ladies down below, so feel free to take a peek and go over and follow them. And yes, they were saying that the virtual class is coming soon, so when it does, I'll be sure to share it on my social as well, so you can jump over and join the second it goes live. But thank you guys for coming, and have a good one.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.